Everyone out. The mafia boss ordered as he recognized a necklace on the waitress. Then he locked the doors. What happened next shocked everyone. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Now let's continue. Tulip Suncrest's evening shift began like every other night at Morello's. The restaurant's rich patrons arrived at exactly 5 p.m., but Tulip always made it a point to slip in through the service entrance at 4:47 p.m., the extra time giving her a moment of calm before the rush. She pulled her dark hair into a tight ponytail, securing it with a pearl pin, an heirloom from her late mother that she had worn for as long as she could remember. It had been 7 years since Catherine, her mother, had given it to her. At the time, Catherine could still perform the simplest tasks. But now, each day, Tulip watched as the woman who once raised her, laughed with her, and held her tightly, faded into the fog of illness. The uniform, once a perfect fit, now hung loosely on her frame. It wasn't the kind of loose that came from a lack of care, but rather the kind that came from the exhaustion of working 60 hours a week for a salary that barely covered the cost of her mother's medications. The remaining paycheck went toward the monthly fees at Clearview Assisted Living, a place Tulip had grown to loathe for the way it made her mother feel like a stranger in her own body. Catherine's mind, once sharp, had been consumed by the disease, leaving behind nothing but fleeting moments of clarity followed by long stretches of confusion. Each morning before her shift, Tulip visited her mother. It wasn't much, just an hour or two, but she held on to those moments like they were the last piece of a crumbling puzzle. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays, without fail, she went to the facility. The consistency of the visits had become a ritual, one Tulip kept with the precision of someone who understood that the small things were the only promises she could reliably keep. Today, Catherine had been lucid for the short time Tulip sat with her in the common room. The smell of industrial cleaner and something old lingered in the air, a reminder of the sterile, impersonal atmosphere that now defined her mother's life. "You work too hard," Catherine had said, the words coming out in fragmented pieces, her hands nervously tugging at the hem of her cardigan. "I'm fine, Mom. You're comfortable there." "That's what matters," Tulip replied, offering a reassuring smile. Catherine nodded, but Tulip could see the flicker of guilt behind her mother's eyes, the kind that spoke of knowledge too painful to acknowledge fully. Catherine knew, on some level, that her illness was a burden, one that she could no longer help carry. The kitchen at Morello's hummed with activity as Tulip entered. Marcus, the head chef, barely spared her a glance. She was used to it. Marcus had trained under a renowned chef in New York for over a decade, and had a chef's disdain for front-of-house staff. She never took it personally. It was just part of the rhythm of her work, as constant as gravity. She grabbed her order book and server's notepad, mentally preparing for the night ahead. The restaurant was expecting a full house. Valentine's Day was next week, and this was the time when couples began their preliminary reconnaissance, scouting locations for their future romantic plans. Morello's was the place for that kind of reconnaissance. Expensive, exclusive, and brimming with the type of power that moved through whispered conversations over champagne and fine dining. Before stepping into the main dining room, Tulip stood in front of her locker and reached for the perfume bottle wrapped in its small velvet pouch. She opened it slowly, as if respecting the bottle's delicate form. The scent was unusual, nothing like the floral perfumes most women wore. It was earthy, warm, with notes of amber and something like leather, an aroma that made her think of old libraries and antique shops. It was a smell that carried history, something tangible and emotional, but she had never been able to place why it stirred her. Her grandmother, Victoria, had given it to her in the final weeks of her life, just before the cancer took its toll on her mind. Victoria had slipped the bottle into her hands with surprising strength for someone so frail. "This is important," she had said, her voice strained but urgent. "When someone recognizes this, you'll understand things about your family, things that will keep you safe." At the time, Tulip had been confused. Her grandmother had always been straightforward, never one to speak in cryptic riddles. But in her final days, the fog of illness had obscured her clarity. Tulip had worn the perfume only once since her grandmother's death. At the funeral and on days when she needed the comfort of something that felt like family. Tonight, for reasons she couldn't explain, she spritzed the perfume again. Just a small amount on her wrists and the hollow of her throat. By 5 p.m., the restaurant had filled to about 40% capacity. Tulip moved through her section with practiced ease, placing water glasses at precise angles and recommending the risotto to those who wanted to appear adventurous without actually straying too far from the safe choices. Everything felt automatic, as if her body had memorized the choreography of the restaurant floor, leaving her mind free to wander elsewhere. It was just after 6:30 p.m., around the time when the first wave of couples arrived, that Marcus spoke to her directly. "Table 9 is going to want something special tonight," he said, nodding toward the back of the dining room. "The man in the corner. He's here about once every 3 months. Always the same table. Always private. Don't ask questions. Just bring him the best fish we have. I'll decide how it's prepared. The restaurant covers whatever he wants." Tulip followed his gaze to the corner booth. Most of the restaurant's corner tables were designed for exclusivity, providing a perfect balance of visibility and isolation. The man seated there stood out immediately, even from across the room. He had a presence that made the air around him feel heavier, almost like the restaurant's quiet buzz had quieted down in his vicinity. He was striking, with sharp features that suggested Italian ancestry, but there was something more to him than just his appearance. His posture was relaxed but controlled, his olive skin and dark slicked-back hair giving him the look of someone who moved through life with effortless authority. He wore a perfectly tailored gray suit, sleek, expensive, and held a wine glass with an air of indifference, as though he was waiting for something but wasn't in a hurry to find it. Most striking of all were his eyes. Deep, dark brown, they scanned the room with calculating precision, as though cataloging everything he saw. When his eyes met hers for just a second, it sent a shock through her chest. She quickly looked away, not wanting to draw attention to herself. She focused on the couple at her table, but she could still feel his gaze, lingering, almost predatory in its stillness. She had learned long ago that certain men did not need to exert force to command a room. They only needed to be. And this man, with his quiet intensity, was one of them. Tulip's evening had progressed like any other. The restaurant buzzed with conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the soft hum of ambient music in the background. But there was something about tonight that felt different. The usual parade of well-dressed patrons didn't stir the same level of excitement in her. She moved through the dining room with practiced grace, offering her smile and service without thinking. But beneath the surface, her thoughts were unsettled. Her brief moment with the man in the corner lingered in her mind, that dark gaze of his still playing at the edges of her consciousness. As the evening wore on, she continued to take orders, deliver food, and check in on her tables, her focus drifting in and out. Every so often, her eyes would return to the man sitting alone at the corner booth. He hadn't spoken to her, hadn't given any indication that he was interested in anything other than his own quiet world. But there was an undeniable magnetism to him, something she couldn't quite place. His stillness was almost too perfect, too calculated. Around 7 p.m., just as the dinner rush reached its peak, she noticed him glancing toward the kitchen, then slowly back at her. The sudden weight of his attention made her heart flutter in an odd, unfamiliar way. He was looking at her, but not as a patron might look at a waitress. It was something else, something deeper. Tulip couldn't stop herself. She met his gaze for just a moment, quickly looking away when she realized how long it had lasted. She had been trained to avoid eye contact with customers for too long, especially those who carried a certain presence, men like him, whose sharp, calculating eyes felt like they were reading her from the inside out. A small part of her wanted to ignore him entirely. It would be easy enough to move on, keep her mind focused on the orders and the tips. But there was a pull, an undeniable force making her turn back. He hadn't spoken a word, yet she felt like he had said everything just with his eyes. The dinner service was nearing its halfway point when Marcus's voice broke through her internal haze. "Get that special order out for table 9, he instructed. His voice terse, devoid of any warmth. Tulip nodded, snapping into work mode. She grabbed the specially prepared fish dish from the pass and made her way toward the corner booth. The man was still seated, now staring out the window at the palm trees lining the street. His fingers tapped absently against the side of his glass, the rhythmic motion oddly hypnotic. She felt her breath catch as she approached. When she reached the booth, she set the dish down in front of him. He looked up at her, and for a second she saw a flicker of something in his eyes, something darker, more intense. He didn't immediately speak, but he nodded toward the seat opposite him. "Sit." It wasn't a request. It was a command. Tulip hesitated, her professional instincts screaming at her to maintain distance, to keep the separation between customer and server. But there was something about him, something almost magnetic, that made her pause. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her, the invisible force pulling her in. She sat. The silence between them stretched on for a moment longer than was comfortable. She cleared her throat. "Is there anything else I can get for you, sir?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. His lips curled into a slight, almost imperceptible smile. "Call me Evian," he said, his voice low and smooth, like velvet brushing against skin. She blinked. "Evian?" "Yes," he replied, leaning back in his seat with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. "And you are?" "Tulip," she replied, feeling oddly flustered. Tulip's Suncrest. She gave a polite but guarded smile, unsure of where this conversation was headed. His gaze didn't leave her face. "Tell me, Tulip, have you ever wondered why things happen the way they do? Why certain people cross your path at certain times?" The question was cryptic, and her unease grew. She had no idea what he was driving at, but there was something about his tone that made it sound far more serious than a simple question. "I don't know what you mean," she replied cautiously, glancing at her watch. She should really be checking in with her other tables. Evian didn't seem to notice her unease. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Your necklace," he said, his gaze flicking to the delicate pendant around her neck. "It's a family heirloom, isn't it?" Tulip's hand instinctively went to the necklace, the small silver pendant that had been passed down from her grandmother. She nodded, her heart suddenly racing. "Yes, it was my grandmother's." Evian's expression shifted, his eyes narrowing as he studied the necklace with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Your grandmother. Victoria, was it?" Tulip's breath caught. She had never mentioned her grandmother's name to anyone at the restaurant. How did he know? Before she could answer, Evian sat back, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "I thought so. I've been looking for someone connected to her family for a long time." Tulip's mind spun as she tried to make sense of his words. Looking for someone connected to her family. What was he talking about? "Do you know who I am, Tulip?" Evian asked, his voice now laced with something darker, something that made her stomach churn. She shook her head, unsure if she wanted to know the answer. "No." He leaned in closer, the weight of his presence overwhelming her. "I'm Evian Locksmith, and your grandmother was more than just a simple old woman. She had ties to a much darker world. A world I happened to control." Tulip felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Evian's smile widened. "I'll explain. But first, I think it's time we had a little talk about your family's legacy. And what it means for you." Tulip hardly slept that night. Her mind was a storm of questions, each one more tangled than the last. The conversation with Evian haunted her thoughts. How could her grandmother, quiet, kind, the woman who had cared for her, be linked to a man like him, a mafia boss? Tulip's pulse quickened at the thought. She had always known there were things Victoria had kept hidden, but this was a secret that made everything she had known about her family feel like a lie. The necklace was no longer just a family heirloom. It was a symbol of a legacy she hadn't even known existed. She had worn it for years, but now, the pendant seemed to pulse with a weight of its own, like a quiet warning she couldn't ignore. She tossed and turned, her thoughts racing. Why hadn't Victoria ever told her? Why had she kept it all hidden? Tulip had always assumed her grandmother's past was unremarkable, a woman who had lived a quiet, ordinary life. But now, Evian has shattered that illusion. He knew more about her family's past than she ever could have imagined. And the worst part was, he was right. Tulip was tied to this world now, whether she liked it or not. Her grandmother's legacy was her legacy too. She sighed, rolling onto her back, staring at the ceiling of her small apartment. The familiar surroundings should have comforted her, but tonight they felt foreign. The ticking of the clock on the wall was the only sound that filled the silence, but it was maddening. Every second ticked by, dragging her deeper into confusion. She had always prided herself on knowing exactly who she was, but now she felt like a stranger in her own life. By the time she managed to fall asleep, it was well past midnight. Her dreams were fragmented, filled with flashes of her grandmother's face, Evian's piercing gaze, and the unrelenting weight of the necklace around her neck. When morning came, Tulip woke with a dull headache. The reality of the situation was settling in. The calm, predictable life she had built for herself was now crumbling. But she didn't have the luxury of hiding from it. She had responsibilities. Her mother's medications had to be paid for, and she couldn't afford to miss another shift at the restaurant. The routine of work was all she had left, a fragile thread she clung to in a world that suddenly seemed far too dangerous. She threw on her uniform and made her way to Morello's, her stomach twisting with a mixture of dread and anticipation. When she arrived, the familiar bustle of the restaurant felt strangely alien. The staff moved like well-oiled machines, each person focused on their tasks, but Tulip couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking through a dream, one that she couldn't wake up from. Morello's was one of the most upscale restaurants in Miami, a place where the city's wealthiest patrons dined in style. The decor was modern, sleek, and intentionally imposing. The atmosphere was always electric, but tonight, Tulip couldn't find the excitement she usually felt. Her mind kept returning to Evian, his words echoing in her ears. Asterisk, you are connected to my family. Your grandmother was involved with mine. Asterisk. As the evening rush began, Tulip kept her focus on her duties. The steady rhythm of taking orders, delivering plates, and refilling water glasses kept her mind occupied, if only temporarily. But no matter how much she tried to push it away, Evian was always there, his face, his eyes, his words. She caught herself glancing over at his corner booth several times throughout the night, each time with a sense of unease tightening in her chest. It wasn't until nearly 9 p.m. that she saw him again. He had arrived later than usual, but as always, his presence seemed to demand attention. Evian's dark eyes scanned the room as he entered, and the entire restaurant seemed to shift around him. Tulip watched as he made his way to the same corner booth, his every step filled with purpose. The waitstaff, as if by instinct, stepped aside to let him pass. He was a man who commanded attention without saying a word. Tulip tried to look away, but her gaze betrayed her. It wasn't even a conscious decision. Her eyes simply followed him, as if her body was reacting to something she couldn't control. He sat still as ever, his back straight, his face unreadable. He didn't look her way, but Tulip could feel his presence like a heavy weight pressing down on her. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves racing in her stomach. She had to stay professional. It was just another shift, just another night. But as she moved through the restaurant, she couldn't stop herself from glancing back at him. His gaze never wavered from his spot, but Tulip had a strange feeling that he knew exactly where she was. Around 10 p.m., the restaurant was quieter, the hum of conversation dwindling to a low murmur. Tulip made her way to the bar area to check in on a few customers, when she felt a chill race down her spine. It wasn't the cold air or the dim lighting. It was the unmistakable presence of Evian. She looked up and their eyes met again. This time he didn't look away. His gaze held hers, steady, unblinking. Tulip's heart skipped a beat. She knew what he wanted. The moment stretched on longer than it should have. She couldn't move. His eyes seemed to draw her in, pulling her toward him, even though she wanted nothing more than to turn away. He had that effect on her. A force that could overpower everything, even her own instincts. "Come," he said softly. His voice just above a whisper but loud enough for her to hear across the room. The command was clear. There was no question. Tulip's legs moved before her mind could catch up. She walked toward his booth, her pulse quickening with each step. When she reached him, he didn't stand or acknowledge her presence in the usual way. Instead, he gestured to the seat opposite him. "Sit," he instructed, his tone calm and unyielding. She did, though she wasn't sure why. Her body seemed to move without her consent, like she was caught in a trance. Once seated, Tulip tried to steady her breathing, but the tension between them was undeniable. Evian leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving hers. "I told you last night that you were tied to my family's world," he said quietly. "But I think you need to understand more. Your grandmother, Victoria, she was more than just a grandmother. She was involved in things you can't even begin to understand." Tulip's heart sank. She hadn't expected this conversation to go deeper, but she should have known. Nothing with Evian ever stayed on the surface. "Victoria helped build my family's empire," Evian continued, his voice steady. "She played a pivotal role in the operations. She was part of the strategy, the planning. She wasn't just a quiet old woman living in a small house. She had a purpose you are now connected to." Tulip felt the floor shift beneath her. The room seemed to close in around her as Evian's words sank in. Her mind was scrambling to keep up with the revelations. Her grandmother, her sweet, protective grandmother, had been a part of a criminal empire? How could this be? "I don't understand," Tulip whispered, her voice barely audible. "My grandmother, she didn't tell me any of this. She never mentioned any of it." Evian smiled faintly, as if he expected her confusion. "She didn't want you involved. She kept it all hidden from you. But you can't run from it, Tulip. Not anymore. The necklace you wear is a key to everything. It's a symbol of your family's loyalty to mine. Your grandmother chose to leave the world behind, but her legacy is still alive. And now it's yours. You can't escape it." Tulip felt a chill wash over her. The idea of being tied to a criminal empire was terrifying. She had never wanted this life, never asked for it. But the more she listened, the more she realized that this wasn't a choice. She had been born into this world, whether she liked it or not. Evian's voice broke through her thoughts again. "I can protect you, Tulip. I can give you everything you've ever wanted. But you have to accept your place in all of this. You have to accept that your family's ties to mine are unbreakable." Tulip's heart raced. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice trembling. "I know," Evian said softly. "But it's already part of who you are. And it's time you accepted it." Tulip sat in stunned silence, her mind reeling. She didn't know what to say or what to do. But as she stared at Evian, she realized something. Her life as she had known it was gone. She was tied to this world now, and there was no turning back. Tulip had hoped that time would offer some distance from the revelations of the night before. But the morning did little to calm the storm inside her. As the day wore on, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything she had known about herself and her family had been a lie. Her grandmother, the woman she had loved and admired for so many years, was connected to a world Tulip had never wanted to be a part of. The Mafia world felt unreal. Yet, Evian's words rang in her ears, echoing in the quiet spaces of her mind. You can't escape it. You're already a part of it. Her shift at Morello's felt like the longest one she had ever worked. Her movements were mechanical, almost like a robot going through the motions. Taking orders, delivering food, refilling water glasses. All of it felt distant, like she was watching herself from the outside. She tried to focus on the guests, on her work. But her thoughts kept drifting back to Evian and the offer he had made. Around 7 p.m., the restaurant was filling up. The buzz of conversation, the clink of silverware, and the hum of the kitchen filled the air. Tulip's mind, however, was far away, still grappling with the decision she hadn't yet made. Could she really walk away from the truth Evian had revealed? Could she just pretend she had heard nothing, go back to her life as if nothing had changed? She didn't have an answer. But what she did know was this. Evian was right. She couldn't ignore her family's legacy. And whether she liked it or not, her life was forever altered. It didn't matter that she wasn't part of his world. Her family's connection to him and the empire he controlled was undeniable. And that necklace, the one her grandmother had passed down to her, was the final, irrefutable link. Just as she was starting to push these thoughts aside, a voice cut through her thoughts. Tulip, table 9, came the sharp voice of Marcus, the head chef. The guy in the corner wants to talk to you. Tulip felt her heart skip a beat. She knew exactly who Marcus was talking about. Evian. Her stomach churned at the thought. She had avoided looking in his direction since last night. But now, as the realization set in that she would have to face him again, she felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders. Taking a deep breath, she made her way toward the back of the dining room, toward his booth. She could feel his presence before she even reached him. His dark eyes seemed to follow her every step. As she approached the booth, Evian looked up from his menu. His expression unreadable. "You're late," he said, his voice low but not unkind. Tulip stopped herself, unsure of how to begin. "Sorry, I was busy." He nodded, his gaze lingering on her face for a moment longer than necessary. There was something about the way he looked at her that made her feel exposed, like he could see every doubt, every fear, swimming beneath her calm exterior. He gestured toward the seat opposite him. "Sit. We need to talk." Reluctantly, she slid into the booth, her hands folding in her lap as she stared at him, trying to read his expression. The tension between them was thick, but there was also something else, something that made Tulip feel both anxious and strangely drawn to him. Evian's gaze softened slightly, but it was still intense. "You've been avoiding me." Tulip didn't know how to respond to that. She hadn't been avoiding him intentionally. She just didn't know how to deal with what he had told her. But now, in the cold, sharp light of this moment, she couldn't escape the truth of it. "I've been trying to figure things out," she admitted quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "What you said. It's a lot to process." He studied her for a moment, his dark eyes searching her face, then nodded. "I understand. But you don't have the luxury of time. Things are moving quickly, and whether you like it or not, you're a part of this now." Tulip's heart thudded in her chest. "I don't want to be a part of this," she said, her voice strained. "I never asked for any of this." Evian leaned back, folding his arms across his chest, his gaze never leaving her. "I didn't ask for it either," he said, his voice steady, but there was an edge to it. "But here we are. Your family's involvement with mine is undeniable, And it's not something you can just walk away from. Tulip's breath caught. I don't know what you want from me. I'm just trying to live my life. He studied her for a long moment before speaking again. I want you to understand the reality of the situation. You're not just anyone. You have a legacy, a name tied to mine, whether you like it or not. She shook her head. You don't understand. I don't want this. I just want to take care of my mom, work my shift, and live a quiet life. I don't want to be part of your world. Evian's eyes narrowed, and for a moment he was silent. Then he sighed, his gaze softening just slightly. I know you don't want this, Tulip. But your family made choices long before you were born. And now, you have to decide what kind of life you want for yourself. Tulip opened her mouth to argue, but he raised a hand, silencing her. Listen to me. I'm not asking you to join me because I want to control you. I'm offering you protection. The world you're about to enter is dangerous. People like me, people who run things, don't play by the rules. But I can offer you security. You're already in my world, whether you accept it or not. But if you choose to stay out of it, you'll never be safe. Your mother will never be safe. The weight of his words hit Tulip like a brick. Her throat tightened as she struggled to breathe. You're threatening my mother, she said, her voice breaking. Evian shook his head, his expression more serious now. I'm not threatening anyone, Tulip. But I'm telling you the truth. I want to protect you. But I can't do that unless you understand what's at stake. This world, my world, doesn't let people like you walk in and out without consequences. Tulip's hands trembled in her lap. What are you asking of me? He didn't respond immediately, instead leaning forward slightly, his voice softening. I'm not asking you to give up everything. I'm asking you to accept the reality of who you are. Your grandmother made her choice. She chose to leave the world behind. But you don't have to. He paused for a moment before continuing. I can offer you a life of comfort, Tulip. Power. Wealth. I can give you everything you've ever wanted. But you have to make the decision. Either you accept me and the legacy of your family's ties to mine, or you walk away. Tulip felt her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to scream, to tell him to leave her alone, to tell him that she didn't need his protection. But deep down, a small part of her recognized the truth in his words. The Mafia world wasn't something she could easily escape. The decision wasn't hers to make. Her family's past had already set the course. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Evian's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. I'm not asking you to decide tonight. But when you're ready, we'll talk. He slid out of the booth, his movement fluid and easy. As he turned to leave, he paused. One more thing. This world won't wait forever. And neither will I. With that, he walked out, leaving Tulip alone in the booth, her thoughts swirling in a haze of confusion, fear, and a deep, gnawing sense of inevitability. The pharmacy run was supposed to be simple, quick, normal. It was none of those things. Tessa had waited until 8:15 a.m., 15 minutes after opening, trying to look like she wasn't rushing. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean and deceptively peaceful. She'd left Kazuo barricaded in the storage room with a bottle of water and the knife, promising to be back within 20 minutes. She made it to her car before she saw them. 2 more black sedans, parked at opposite ends of the street with perfect sightlines to the pharmacy. Not trying to hide. Wanting her to know they were there. They're watching. Every move you make. She drove anyway because what choice did she have? Kazuo's fever was getting worse, and without antibiotics, he wouldn't last another day. She parked outside Havenwood Pharmacy, a small mom-and-pop operation that had been there since the 50s, and tried to ignore the eyes she felt tracking her every movement. Inside, she grabbed a basket and moved with purpose. Antibiotics were behind the counter, prescription only, but she knew old Mr. Chen, who ran the place, sometimes bent the rules for locals. Tessa. Mr. Chen smiled warmly from behind the counter. Rough night at the diner. You look tired. Storm kept me up, she said, managing a smile. Actually, Mr. Chen, I need a favor. My grandmother is visiting and she's developed an infection. Probably from a cut that got dirty. She's stubborn, won't go to the doctor. Mr. Chen's expression grew concerned. An infection can be serious, especially for elderly. I know. That's why I'm hoping. Maybe you could help. Just this once. Some amoxicillin maybe. He hesitated, glancing toward the window. Tessa followed his gaze and saw one of the black sedans had moved, now parked directly across from the pharmacy. Mr. Chen's face changed, understanding dawning. He'd lived through enough to recognize trouble when it parked outside his door. Without a word, he turned and pulled a bottle from the shelf behind him. Then another. Antibiotics, fever reducers, and a surgical kit he shouldn't have been selling without authorization. For your grandmother, he said quietly, ringing them up. Tell her to be careful. Infections can spread quickly. Sometimes the only choice is to remove yourself from the infected area completely. The metaphor wasn't subtle. She paid in cash, Kazuo's cash, and Mr. Chen added extra supplies to her bag without charging for them. Gauze, surgical tape, even a bottle of lidocaine. Thank you, she whispered. Go out the back, he said, nodding toward the rear of the store. Through the alley. Your car. I'll come back for it. She slipped out the back door and into the narrow alley that ran behind Main Street. Her heart was pounding as she moved quickly but carefully, avoiding puddles and debris from the storm. She could circle back to the diner on foot, approach from the woods behind. The first shot shattered the morning silence. It came from the direction of the diner, the sharp crack of gunfire echoing off the buildings. Then another. And another. Tessa ran. She sprinted through backyards and side streets, the pharmacy bag clutched against her chest, her lungs burning. More gunfire, rapid bursts now. Full automatic weapons. The kind of firepower that turned walls into suggestions and cover into concealment. She burst through the tree line behind the diner just in time to see the war that had come to her doorstep. 3 black SUVs had surrounded the building. Men in tactical gear were firing into the diner, the windows already shattered, the neon sign sparking and dying as bullets tore through it. The beautiful, mundane safety of her workplace was being systematically destroyed, but they were taking return fire. From inside the diner, someone was shooting back with controlled, precise shots. The storage room window, she realized. Kazuo. Even wounded, even feverish, he was fighting. One of the attackers went down, clutching his shoulder. Another ducked behind a vehicle as bullets sparked off the hood. These weren't the professional intimidation tactics Shimada had used. This was Kenji's kill team, here to end things definitively. A voice boomed across the parking lot, amplified by a megaphone. Takeda, your guards are dead. Ryota didn't even make it past the state line. You're alone. Come out and die with dignity. The response was 3 shots that spider-webbed the windshield of the lead SUV. Tessa crept closer through the trees, trying to see into the diner, to find some way to help. That's when she saw the gas cans. 2 of the attackers were circling around with red containers, planning to burn the building with Kazuo inside. Whoa. She thought of the knife in her pocket, of Shimada's business card. Of all the moments in her life when she'd had to choose between safety and doing what was right. The man with the gas can nearest to her position had his back turned, focused on the front of the building where the gunfire was concentrated. Tessa moved before she could think too hard about it, coming up behind him silent and desperate. The knife went in just below his tactical vest, into the soft area near his kidney. It was nothing like the movies. It was hard, resistant, terrible. The man made a sound like surprise and pain mixed together, dropping the gas can as he spun toward her. His eyes were wide, shocked to see a civilian, a woman, a waitress with blood on her hands and determination on her face. He reached for his sidearm, but she was already moving, grabbing the gas can and swinging it with all her strength. It connected with his head with a dull thong, and he went down. She grabbed his pistol, a black automatic she didn't know the name of, and ran toward the diner's back entrance. The door was riddled with bullet holes, hanging off its hinges. She burst through, staying low, and found herself in hell. The diner was destroyed. Every window shattered, every booth torn apart by gunfire. The coffee maker she'd cleaned 1,000 times was in pieces. The pie case was a glittering cascade of broken glass. And there, behind the overturned counter, was Kazuo. He'd fashioned a makeshift barricade from tables and the old metal ice cream freezer. His shirt was soaked with blood. His wound had reopened, but his eyes were clear, focused, deadly. In his hands was a pistol he must have taken from one of the attackers who'd tried to breach the front door. The man's body lay sprawled near the entrance. "Tessa!" His voice was sharp with something that might have been fear, not for himself, but for her. "Get out! Run!" "With what car?" she shouted back, ducking as another burst of gunfire sent fragments of tile flying. "They've got us surrounded." "How many?" "I count 8, maybe 9. One down in back." She held up the pistol she'd taken. "I got one." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, respect, and something else she couldn't identify. "Can you shoot?" "I'm from Baltimore." "What do you think?" It wasn't really an answer, but he nodded as if it was. "They'll try to flank us. Cover the kitchen door. Short bursts, don't waste ammunition." The tactical reality of their situation was dire. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped in a building that was being torn apart around them. But there was something about fighting alongside Kazuo, seeing him in his element despite his injuries, that made the impossible seem merely unlikely. A smoke grenade came through one of the broken windows, filling the diner with thick gray fog. Through it she saw shapes moving, advancing. She fired twice, saw one shape stumble back. Kazuo was firing too, controlled and methodical even as the smoke burned their eyes and throats. "We need to move," he said, suddenly beside her. When had he moved? "They're going to burn the building whether we're in it or not." "Where?" "They've got the whole place surrounded." "Not the whole place." He was looking at the floor, at the ancient trapdoor that led to the diner's cellar. It was mostly used for storing old equipment and rat poison, but it connected to the storm drains. She knew because she'd had to go down there once when the pipes backed up. "The storm drains lead to the creek behind the woods," she said, understanding. "Can you make it? Through the water, in the dark? Can you? You can barely stand." "I'll make it." There was steel in his voice, the same tone he'd used on the phone with Ryota. The voice of a man who'd survived by refusing to die. "But Tessa, once we go down there, once we run, you can't come back here. Ever. This life, this diner, this town, it's over." Another burst of gunfire, closer now. Someone shouted in Japanese. The smoke was starting to clear. "It was over the moment I opened that door," she said. He nodded, and for a moment, his hand touched her face. A gesture so gentle it seemed impossible from someone who just killed to survive. "I'm sorry. And thank you. Thank me when we're alive." Together they pulled open the trapdoor. The smell of damp earth and worse things wafted up. Without hesitation, Tessa dropped down into the darkness. Kazuo followed, pulling the door shut above them just as fresh gunfire erupted in the diner. The cellar was exactly as she remembered. Cramped, dank, full of forgotten things. But at the far end, barely visible in the dim light filtering through the floorboards, was the grate that led to the storm drains. Above them, boots thundered across the diner floor. Someone shouted, "They're not here. Check the back." "The cellar," another voice called. "There's a cellar." Kazuo had found a crowbar among the stored tools. He jammed it through the trapdoor's handles just as someone tried to pull it open from above. The door rattled but held. "Go," he said, already working on the storm drain grate. It came loose with a screech of rusted metal. The drain beyond was a concrete pipe, maybe 4 feet in diameter, with several inches of storm runoff flowing through it. It smelled like rain and rot and 30 years of small-town drainage. "This is our escape route," Tessa asked. "Unless you prefer to burn." As if to emphasize his point, smoke began seeping through the floorboards. They were setting the diner on fire. Tessa went first, dropping into the cold water with a gasp. It came up to her knees, flowing fast from the storm. Kazuo followed, grunting in pain as the movement tore at his wounds. Behind them, the trapdoor splintered as someone took an axe to it. They ran. Or rather, they moved as fast as they could through the rushing water and absolute darkness. Tessa led, one hand on the slimy concrete wall, the other held out in front of her. Behind her, she could hear Kazuo's labored breathing, the splash of his struggling steps. The pipe seemed endless. Several times it branched, and she chose directions by instinct, always heading toward what she hoped was the creek. The water got deeper, colder. Something brushed against her leg, a rat, debris she didn't want to know. Then finally blessed daylight. A circle of gray morning 50 feet ahead where the pipe opened into the creek. They emerged like something from a horror movie, soaked and filthy, gasping for clean air. The creek was swollen from the storm, running fast and dangerous. But across it was the forest, thick and concealing. "Can you swim?" Tessa asked. "Do I have a choice?" They plunged into the creek. The current immediately grabbed them, pulling them downstream. Tessa fought to keep her head above water, to angle toward the far bank. Beside her, Kazuo was struggling, his strength finally failing. She grabbed him, using every ounce of strength she had left to pull him toward shore. They hit a fallen tree extending into the water, and she used it to haul them both onto the muddy bank. They lay there for a moment, breathing hard, soaked and shivering. Behind them, smoke rose from where the diner burned. Her sanctuary, her fresh start, her normal life, all of it going up in flames. "We need to keep moving," Kazuo said, struggling to his feet. "They'll figure out where we went soon enough." "Where? Where can we possibly go?" "I have a safe house, 40 miles north. If we can get there." "If. That's a big if." "Yes." He looked at her, really looked at her. Soaked, muddy, having just stabbed a man and helped a Yakuza boss escape a kill team. "But you're still here. Still fighting. That's not nothing." She wanted to laugh. Or cry. Or both. Instead, she stood up, offered him her shoulder to lean on. 40 miles north, she said. "We better get started." They disappeared into the forest as sirens began to wail in the distance. Behind them, the last stop diner collapsed in a shower of sparks and memory. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and a life Tessa had never imagined. She'd made her choice. Now she'd have to live with it, or die trying. The forest didn't care who they were. By the time dawn broke fully, the mud-slick trails had become indistinguishable ribbons of brown, the air heavy with the musk of wet pine and decay. Every step through the thicket forced Tessa and Kazuo deeper into a world that existed beyond the reach of normal life. Wild, uncaring, and dangerous in ways she hadn't yet begun to process. Kazuo leaned on her less than he should have. Pride, she thought grimly. Even half dead, the man refused to act like he needed saving. His left arm was clutched protectively against his ribs, the torn fabric of his shirt still dark with blood that hadn't fully dried. Yet his posture was rigid, controlled, and made it clear that surrender was not an option he recognized. "How far?" she asked, breathless. "Another few miles before we hit the old service road," he said. "Then we'll find a vehicle. Or steal one." "Right," she muttered. "Casual morning grand theft auto. Add that to my growing resume of bad life choices." He almost smiled. Almost. The expression flickered across his face like a memory of warmth he no longer had time for. She stopped under a cedar tree, dropping the soaked pharmacy bag. "We have to rest. You're not going to make it if we don't get those antibiotics in you." Kazuo hesitated, scanning the tree line. Then, with a sharp exhale, a concession more than agreement, he lowered himself onto a patch of dry grass beneath the tree's wide boughs. He moved with the slow, deliberate care of a man cataloging every injury and refusing to let them win. Tessa dug through the pharmacy bag. Mr. Chen had been generous. Antibiotics, gauze, antiseptic, even a small needle kit. She tore open an alcohol wipe, wincing at how her own hands were trembling. "Take your shirt off," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "You're very direct." "Take off." She glared at him, the exhaustion sharpening her tone. He obeyed this time, though he did it at his own pace, peeling away the shredded fabric slowly, revealing a body marked not just by this night's violence but by scars that told older stories. Some knife wounds, some burns, one jagged line over his ribs that looked nearly fatal once upon a time. "God," she whispered. "What have you survived?" "Too much," he said simply. She cleaned his wound, working as gently as she could. Every time the alcohol touched raw skin he tensed, jaw clenching, but he said nothing. When she gave him the antibiotics and painkillers, he swallowed them without water, eyes fixed on some memory in the middle distance. "Your temperature's still high. Fever's not gone yet. It will pass. You sound very sure." He glanced at her, and in the weak light dappled between the cedar branches, she saw something raw and human there. "I've survived worse." "Right. You keep saying that." Silence settled between them, heavy and awkward but not entirely hostile. The kind that suggested two people trying to make sense of each other in a world that had gone mad. Finally Tessa said, "You said there's a safe house. 40 miles north." He nodded. "An old Ryokan-style lodge converted for quieter meetings. One of my people manages the property under a false name. If Kenji hasn't reached him yet, we'll be safe there long enough to regroup." "We." She latched onto the word. "I don't remember signing up for we." Kazuo's gaze met hers, unwavering. "You don't have a choice now." "What's that supposed to mean?" He straightened slowly, each motion careful. "Shimada knows your name, your past. Your face is now connected to mine. If you walk into any police station, any hospital, they'll find you. Kenji will find you. My world doesn't forget witnesses, Tessa. It erases them." Her breath caught. "So what, you're saying I'm trapped?" "I'm saying," he said quietly, "that for now, the safest place for you to be is with me." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Right. Because being hunted by the Yakuza with their ex-boss bleeding on my arm is every girl's dream vacation. If sarcasm keeps you breathing, keep it." Something in his deadpan tone, utterly, unironically sincere, made her laugh again, despite herself. It was ridiculous, this moment, these circumstances. The waitress and the wounded gangster bantering like old friends on the run. The absurdity almost steadied her. "Fine," she said after a moment. "You win. For now we do it your way. But if this so-called safe house turns out to be a trap, I swear I'll..." He blinked slowly. "You'll what?" "Throw you in a creek again." This time his faint smile was real. They found an abandoned ranger outpost 2 hours later. From the looks of it, no one had used the place in decades. A single-story stone cabin, half swallowed by moss and vines, its glass windows broken and the interior filled with dust that smelled of damp leaves. Kazuo scanned the perimeter with soldier-like precision before declaring it safe. Only then did Tessa collapse onto a rotted couch near the cold fireplace. "Home sweet home," she muttered. "We'll stay until nightfall," he said, closing the door behind them. "Then travel under cover. You still think these guys are out there hunting?" "I don't think," he said flatly. "I know." He went to the small wood stove and began stacking logs from an old pile in the corner. His hands moved efficiently, practiced. When he struck a match, the flare of light painted his features in soft gold, and for the first time, Tessa noticed how much the exhaustion had carved into him. The aura of command was still there, but underneath he was breaking. "You don't have to do all of this alone," she said softly. He didn't look at her. "That's what power requires. Being alone. That's crap." His head turned. "Excuse me. You heard me. You want to control everything, you build empires and give orders like a king, but what's it actually gotten you? You're bleeding to death in the middle of nowhere, and the people you trusted most are trying to kill you." His expression hardened. "You don't understand my world." "Then explain it," she said. "Because from out here, it looks like it eats everyone who touches it." For a long moment he didn't move. Then he said quietly, "When I became Kumicho, I thought I could reshape the family. Make it cleaner, smarter, less brutal." His voice darkened. "But violence doesn't vanish. It adapts. You either use it, or it uses you." Tessa met his gaze steadily. "And which one are you now?" His answer came after a long pause. A man trying to remember the difference. The fire crackled between them. Outside, wind whispered through the trees like ghosts passing judgment. By the time the flames burned low, Kazuo was half asleep on the floor near the hearth, bandaged and fever finally easing. Tessa sat nearby, watching the glow trace the angles of his face, the scars, the faint frown even in rest. She didn't understand how someone could look so dangerous and yet, at this rare distance, so utterly human. Without thinking, she reached for the Omamori charm he kept close, setting it gently beside him. He stirred but didn't wake. "Some protector you are," she whispered toward the charm. "You better keep him alive. Because apparently I'm stuck with him." Her voice trembled on the last words, but she forced out a shaky laugh anyway. The sound seemed to steady her. She leaned back against the couch, exhaustion finally catching up, the line between fear and something far more complicated blurring in the flickering light. She woke hours later to the sound of movement not his. Crunch of boots outside. Voices low, careful, trained. Kazuo was already up, bleeding arm or not, gun in hand, every trace of fatigue gone. "They found us," he said simply. Tessa's heart raced. "What do we do?" He looked at her, eyes unreadable but fierce. "We run. But this time we don't just run to survive." His tone changed colder, sharper. The commander awakened. "This time we make them pay for following us." Tessa swallowed hard, adrenaline igniting the truth she'd been avoiding since the storm. She wasn't just helping a wounded man anymore. She was part of something darker, bloodier. And now there was no turning back. The morning after the outpost attack broke over the mountains in muted gold, washing the forest in deceptive calm. Smoke still drifted lazily from what had once been their shelter, now a charred shell riddled with bullet holes. They'd made it out alive. Barely. Kazuo limped ahead of her on the service road, his shirt tied tightly around the fresh wound on his left side. Tessa followed a few paces behind, adrenaline the only thing keeping her upright. Part of her still couldn't believe what they'd survived. The flash grenades, the whispered orders in Japanese, the gunfire cutting through wood and glass. The men who'd found them in the night weren't police. They moved too cleanly, too coordinated. These were killers, Kenji's men. Tessa's confidence had been gutted during those terrifying moments. Not by the bullets, not by the chase, but by the thing Kazuo had said before they fled into the forest again. If anyone else finds us first, don't speak. No names. No trust. He hadn't been talking about Kenji's men. He'd been talking about his own. It was almost noon when they finally reached a narrow gravel road that led down to an abandoned lumber mill. Rusted saw blades hung like fossils, and the cavernous building offered some small promise of shelter. Inside, the air was thick with dust and oil. Sunbeams cut through cracks in the walls, forming ghostly shafts that illuminated floating moats. The building smelled of history and endings. Kazuo eased himself down on a crate in the corner, shoulders slumped. We'll rest here. Just for a few hours. Ryota will have tracked our signal by now. Tessa felt a flicker of hope. He made it past the checkpoints. Ryota always does what needs to be done, Kazuo said, a trace of rare warmth in his voice. If anyone can outsmart Kenji's men, it's him. They sat in silence for a while, Tessa staring at the beams of light, Kazuo breathing shallowly, the fire in his eyes dimmed by exhaustion. She wanted to believe him, to believe there was still someone coming who could save them both. But when the crunch of tires on gravel echoed outside that afternoon, something in her stomach twisted. Kazuo grabbed his pistol instantly, scanning the doorway. Two figures stepped out of a black SUV parked beyond the clearing, both Japanese, both dressed not like enforcers but like men who lived between worlds. Expensive suits paired with boots caked in mud. Kazuo rose slowly. Ryota. The taller of the two men inclined his head. Kumicho. Relief flashed in Kazuo's expression, but it was sharp, fleeting, and gone as quickly as it came. Tessa saw it before he masked it. Hesitation. The shorter man stepped forward first. His English accented but fluent. We found your signal and came as quickly as we could. He glanced briefly at Tessa. This is her. The woman who sheltered you. Kazuo nodded faintly. Tessa saved my life. The man smiled, a smile full of teeth and practiced politeness. Then she has my respect. And my sympathy. Something about the way he said sympathy made Tessa's skin crawl. Ryota approached Kazuo, resting a steadying hand on his shoulder. Kenji's men are widespread, Takeda-san. They control the highways and some of the border crossings. But we have transport waiting near the river. We can be in the safe house by nightfall. Kazuo studied him carefully. Where Tessa saw an old ally, Kazuo saw every flicker of movement, every blink. And the others? Dead, Ryota said, his voice flat. Kenji gave no quarter. Only the loyal ones remain. The loyal ones, Kazuo repeated softly. He was good at hiding his emotion, but Tessa had begun to understand his silences. Something wasn't sitting right. Still, they followed Ryota and his companion out of the mill and down the steep dirt road leading toward the river. The journey was quiet except for the crunch of gravel and the occasional bird call. At the bottom of the hill, a sleek black SUV idled near a narrow bridge too expensive, too perfect, too staged for the wilderness around it. Two more men waited near the vehicle. The moment Kazuo slowed, Tessa felt it. The air changed, the quiet too deliberate. Ryota turned slightly. Not enough to be threatening, just enough to meet Kazuo's eyes. Kumicho, he said softly. I told you once I'd die for you. Kazuo tensed. His voice was low, lethal. And now? Ryota's gaze flicked toward Tessa. Now I'm not sure you should be alive at all. Everything happened at once. Kazuo went for his gun. Ryota was faster, stepping back and drawing his own weapon in one smooth motion. The air exploded with sound. Bullets slammed into the SUV behind them, glass shattering in a spray of shards. Tessa dove behind a rock as Kazuo fired back, 2 shots precise as clockwork. One of Ryota's men fell. Another returned fire, rounds slicing into the dirt near Tessa's feet. Ryota's voice cut through the chaos. Kenji said to deliver you alive if possible, dead if necessary. But you made that choice for us when you ran, Kazuo. Kazuo's reply was quieter but colder than anything she'd heard him say. Kenji always did need others to do his killing. A shot caught Ryota's arm. He staggered back, firing wildly. Tessa grabbed the pistol Kazuo had dropped when he stumbled. She'd never fired one in daylight before, but instinct overrode fear. She squeezed the trigger just as Ryota took aim at Kazuo again. The recoil jolted her entire body. Ryota went down. Kazuo limped over, breathing hard, checking the man's pulse. You shouldn't have done that, he said. You're welcome, she snapped, her hands trembling. He met her eyes, something like sorrow in his. No, you don't understand. Ryota's phone was already ringing. Kenji. Kazuo picked it up, answering in Japanese. Tessa couldn't understand the words, but she didn't need to. The fury in his tone told her enough. When he finally threw the phone into the river, his hands were shaking. He used you, she said quietly. Ryota. He wanted to find us, didn't he? Kazuo nodded. He was my psycho common before Kenji promoted him. I thought he'd stayed loyal. But Kenji didn't just buy his loyalty. He bought his family's freedom. You mean? They were hostages, Kazuo said, voice low. Kenji's leverage. Tessa felt the air drain out of her lungs. So all this whole plan. You were being led here? Kazuo didn't answer. That was enough. She stood rigid, anger surging through exhaustion and fear. So is that it? All of this for nothing. The diner, the people who died, me lying to police, nearly getting killed for you. It was all just part of someone else's trap. Tessa. Don't, she snapped. Don't call me that. Was I part of it too? He froze. Go on, she said, stepping closer. You owe me that much truth. Was I part of your plan? Did you come into my diner that night because you knew I'd help? The silence that followed was worse than any lie. He didn't deny it. Her voice broke. You used me. I didn't know you, he said quietly. Not at first. I just needed a place to hide. But then what? I became useful. His words came halting, raw. Then you saved my life and it stopped being a plan. She shook her head, tears cutting through the grime on her face. That's not better. Kazuo moved toward her, but she stepped back. Don't. Just stay away from me. Behind them, the sound of distant engines cut through the forest again. Back up. Kenji's forces closing in. Kazuo's tone hardened. We have to move. Now. She stared at him, the man who had dragged her into this nightmare, who had lied and protected and destroyed in equal measure. For a moment, she considered leaving him there, running into the forest and taking her chances. But when she looked at him bleeding, broken, still standing between her and the danger, she knew she couldn't. Don't talk to me, she said, picking up the rifle Ryota had dropped. But if you want to live, follow me. Together they disappeared into the trees again, two fugitives bound by betrayal, survival, and the uneasy truth between them. As they vanished into the shadows, the river carried Ryota's phone downstream, its shattered screen flickering one last message before dying completely. Kenji. Location confirmed. Send the others. No survivors. The safe house wasn't safe anymore. They'd made it there by nightfall, barely. A converted ryokan nestled deep in the mountains, its traditional architecture a strange contrast to the reinforced doors and security cameras Kazuo's people had installed. It should have been a fortress. Instead, it felt like a tomb waiting to be sealed. Tessa hadn't spoken to him since the river. She'd walked 3 paces behind him the entire journey, rifle slung across her back, her silence more cutting than any accusation. Kazuo had tried twice to explain, to apologize, to something, but each time, she'd simply looked through him as if he were already a ghost. Now they stood in the main hall of the lodge, traditional tatami mats beneath their feet, paper screens filtering moonlight into soft squares of silver. It was beautiful, serene, a mockery of the violence closing in around them. "The perimeter is monitored," Kazuo said, checking the security panel near the entrance. "Motion sensors, cameras. We'll have warning if anyone approaches." "Will we have time to run?" Tessa asked flatly. It was the first thing she'd said to him in hours. He hesitated. "Probably not." "Then what's the point?" "The point," he said quietly, "is to make them pay for every inch." She laughed, bitter, exhausted. "You're going to fight them. You can barely stand." It was true. The antibiotics had helped, but infection and blood loss had taken their toll. He moved like a man 20 years older, each step measured and careful. The commander's bearing was still there, but the body was failing. "I've faced worse odds," he said. "Stop saying that." The words exploded out of her. "Stop pretending you're invincible. You're not. You're bleeding and broken," and her voice cracked. "And you're going to die here. We both are. Because of your world, your choices, your—" The security alarm cut through her words like a blade. Kazuo's eyes snapped to the monitor. Multiple heat signatures approaching from 3 directions. Vehicles at least 5. "There are too many men to count." "They're here," he said simply. Tessa felt her blood turn to ice. "How? How did they find us so fast?" Kazuo's jaw tightened. "Ryota's phone. I should have destroyed it before," he shook his head. "It doesn't matter now." He moved to a hidden panel in the wall, pressing a section of wood that released with a soft click. Inside was an arsenal that made Tessa's stomach drop. Rifles, pistols, ammunition, even grenades. The tools of a man who'd always known this day might come. "Take this," he said, handing her a compact submachine gun. 30 rounds. Short burst. Don't waste ammunition. "Kazuo. And this." Tactical vest, surprisingly light. "Kevlar. Might stop a pistol round. Won't stop a rifle, but it's better than nothing." "I don't want to." "Tessa." He turned to face her fully, and for the first time since the river, she saw past the crime boss to the man beneath. Scared. Sorry. Determined. "I know you hate me right now. You have every right. But if you want to survive the next hour, you need to listen." The sound of engines grew louder. Doors slamming. Voices shouting in Japanese. "The lodge has 3 entry points," Kazuo continued, his tone shifting into tactical mode. "Front entrance, kitchen door, and the garden gate. They'll try to breach simultaneously. Overwhelm our defenses." "Our defenses. There's 2 of us. Which is why we don't defend. We make them come to us, funnel them into kill zones." He pulled out a small detonator. "I have shaped charges on the main supports. If it comes to it, you'll bring the whole building down on us. On them. We'll be in the cellar. There's a tunnel that leads to the hillside. My grandfather built it during the occupation. An escape route." Tessa stared at him. "So why fight at all? Why not just run?" "Because they'll follow. Because Kenji won't stop until I'm dead and everyone who helped me is erased." His dark eyes held hers. "Because the only way you get your life back is if I end this. Tonight." A loudspeaker crackled to life outside. Kenji's voice amplified and terrible. "Kazuo Takeda. You have dishonored the clan. Betrayed our codes. There is no escape from judgment." Kazuo's hand tightened on his weapon. "Kenji always did love an audience. Come out and face justice. Or we will burn this shrine to your grandfather's memory to the ground." "Stay behind me," Kazuo told Tessa. Watch the flanks. If anyone gets past me. I know. Short burst. Don't waste ammunition. She checked the weapon with shaking hands. I can't believe I'm doing this. You don't have to. Tunnel, you could go now. Get out before. And then what? She met his eyes. Spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering when they'll find me. Well, you said it yourself, the only way out is through. Something shifted in his expression. Respect maybe. Or sorrow at what he'd made her become. The first window exploded inward, glass and wood frame shattering as a flashbang grenade tumbled across the tatami. Kazuo kicked it back through the opening a split second before it detonated. The flash and concussive blast were followed by screaming. Now they're angry, he muttered. Gunfire erupted from 3 sides. Bullets tore through the paper screens, the beautiful traditional walls offering no protection. Kazuo returned fire in controlled bursts, dropping back toward the interior hallway. Tessa followed, her own weapon feeling impossibly heavy. A figure burst through the kitchen entrance, young, maybe 20, wearing tactical gear and carrying an assault rifle. He turned toward Tessa, and she fired without thinking. The recoil shocked through her arms. The man went down. Keep moving, Kazuo shouted. They fell back through a narrow corridor, Kazuo placing small charges on support beams as they went. Behind them, more men poured into the lodge. She could hear orders being shouted, the systematic clearing of rooms. Professional. Military. How many? She gasped. Too many. They reached a traditional tea room at the lodge's center. Kazuo positioned himself behind a low wooden table, rifle aimed at the doorway. Here. We make our stand here. That's not a plan. That's suicide. It's the only room with one entrance. They can't flank us. They can just throw grenades and, as if on cue, something metallic bounced into the room. Kazuo grabbed it and hurled it back in one fluid motion. The explosion rocked the hallway, followed by more screaming. They'll be more careful now, he said. Which buys us time. For what? He pulled out his phone, not his own but Ryota's, which he'd apparently kept after all. His fingers moved quickly across the cracked screen. What are you doing? Calling in a debt. The phone rang twice before a woman's voice answered. Kazuo spoke rapid Japanese, his tone sharp and commanding. The conversation lasted maybe 30 seconds. When he ended the call, his expression was unreadable. The police? Tessa asked hopefully. Worse. The Yamaguchi-gumi. Her blood ran cold. Another Yakuza clan. My grandfather's oldest rivals. Also the people Kenji was supposed to be negotiating with the night he betrayed me. Kazuo's smile was sharp. They're very interested to know that Kenji is operating in their territory without permission. So what, they're just going to show up and save us? No. They're going to show up and claim Kenji violated the truce. What happens to us in the crossfire? He shrugged. That's our problem. More gunfire. Closer now. Voices in the hallway coordinating. We don't have much time, Kazuo said. He handed her the detonator. If they breach this room, if I go down, you push this button and run for the cellar. The tunnel exit is marked with a red lantern. Follow the hillside north for 3 miles until you reach a highway. There's a payphone at the truck stop. Call this number. He pressed a piece of paper into her hand. Tell them the crane has fallen. They'll extract you. I'm not leaving you. Tessa. I said I'm not leaving you. The words came out fierce, surprising them both. You used me, lied to me, dragged me into this nightmare. But you're not dying alone in this room. You don't get to make that my last memory of you. He stared at her, something cracking in his carefully maintained composure. Why? Because someone should witness it, she said quietly. should remember that you tried to do the right thing. Even if it killed you. The emotion that crossed his face was too raw, too human for the feared Yakuza boss. Tessa, The wall exploded. Not the door, the entire wall. Shaped charges detonated simultaneously, blowing the traditional screens and wooden supports inward in a maelstrom of fire and splinters. Tessa was thrown backward, her ears ringing, eyes blinded by dust and smoke. Through the haze, figures poured in. 6, maybe 8. Tactical gear, night vision, professional killers doing professional work. Kazuo fired from where he'd fallen, dropping 2 before his rifle clicked empty. A boot caught him in the ribs, another in the shoulder. Tessa screamed, raising her own weapon, but someone grabbed her from behind, slamming her to the ground. The barrel of a gun pressed against her temple. Enough! Kenji's voice. He stepped through the smoking ruins of the wall, immaculate in a gray suit despite the destruction around him. Younger than Kazuo, maybe 35, with the kind of handsome features that belonged in boardrooms and photo spreads. Nothing about him suggested the monster he was. Kazuo, he said almost fondly. You've led us on quite a chase. Kazuo struggled to his knees, blood running from a cut above his eye. Kenji. Still hiding behind others, I see. Delegation is the mark of good leadership. You should have learned that. I learned that honor matters. Code matters. Things you abandoned for profit. Kenji laughed. Honor. You're dying for honor. How traditional. How? Grandfather. He practically spat the last word. The old ways are dead, Kazuo. The world has moved on. Then why do you still need me dead? If the old ways are finished, what threat am I? Kenji's smile faltered slightly. You're a symbol. And symbols have power. He gestured to one of his men, who handed him a katana, old, beautiful, probably worth more than the lodge itself. Our grandfather gave this to your father. Your father gave it to you. Now I'll use it to end the Takeda line properly. With tradition. Kazuo said nothing, but his hand moved subtly toward the detonator that had fallen near his knee. Tessa saw it. So did Kenji. Ah, Kenji said. The shaped charges. I wondered why you'd fortify a building you planned to destroy. He kicked the detonator away. No, you don't get a warrior's death, cousin. You get to watch your world burn. Starting with her. The gun at Tessa's temple pressed harder. She's innocent, Kazuo said, and for the first time, real fear entered his voice. Civilian. She has nothing to do with. She has everything to do with it. She's the woman who saved you, who helped you escape. Who? Kenji smiled cruelly. Who you care about. I can see it in your eyes. Kenji, please. Begging. How far you've fallen. The moment stretched, crystalline and sharp. Tessa could feel the gunman's finger tightening on the trigger. Could see Kazuo's desperate calculation too far to reach her. Too weak to fight, no weapons, no options. And then the windows exploded inward. Not from charges, from gunfire. Heavy automatic fire from outside raking the room. Kenji's men scattered, returning fire. The gun at Tessa's temple shifted away as her captor spun toward the new threat. She grabbed the detonator. Tessa, no. Kazuo shouted. She pressed it anyway. The world became sound and fury. The shaped charges detonated in sequence, support beams exploding, the ceiling beginning its inexorable collapse. Kazuo lunged across the room, grabbing her, pulling her toward the floor panel that marked the cellar entrance. Behind them, Kenji screamed orders as his men scrambled for exits. The new attackers, the Yamaguchi-gumi, Tessa realized dimly, were breaching the front entrance, and suddenly it was a three-way war in a building that was actively dying. Kazuo tore open the floor panel and shoved Tessa down into darkness. She landed hard on stone, the breath knocked from her lungs. A moment later he dropped beside her, slamming the panel shut just as a support beam crashed down where they'd been standing. "Run!" he gasped. They ran through absolute darkness, hands on wet stone walls, the tunnel floor uneven beneath their feet. Behind them, the sounds of battle were muffled, replaced by the groan of settling wood and breaking stone. The tunnel seemed endless. Tessa's lungs burned, her legs screaming for her to stop, but Kazuo's hand on her back kept her moving. Forward. Always forward. Finally blessed air. The red lantern Kazuo had mentioned, swaying in the mountain breeze. They burst out of the tunnel and into the night, collapsing onto pine needles and moss. Behind them, the lodge was an inferno. The explosion had ignited something, fuel, maybe ammunition, and now flames reached toward the stars. Silhouettes moved in the firelight. Gunfire still echoed. "We have to keep moving," Kazuo said, but his voice was weak. When Tessa looked at him, she saw fresh blood soaking through his shirt. New wounds from the final fight. How bad? Bad enough. He struggled to his feet, swaying. 3 miles north. A truck stop. "Can you make it? Can you?" He smiled faintly. "I've survived worse." "Stop saying that. Make me." Despite everything, the terror, the violence, the betrayal, she found herself smiling. They'd survived. Against impossible odds, they'd survived. Together, they disappeared into the forest one last time, leaving the burning lodge and the war between clans behind them. Above, indifferent stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. The showdown was over. Now came the hardest part, learning to live with what they'd become. The truck stop appeared like a mirage through the pre-dawn mist, neon signs advertising diesel and coffee, the hum of idling 18-wheelers, the promise of anonymity among the transient and the weary. Tessa and Kazuo stumbled into the parking lot just as the first fingers of sunlight touched the mountains behind them. They looked like what they were. Survivors of a war. Kazuo's shirt was more blood than fabric now. His face had gone the gray color of old newspaper, and he leaned on Tessa so heavily she wondered if she was carrying him or if they were simply holding each other upright through sheer stubbornness. "The payphone," he rasped, nodding toward a battered booth near the restrooms. "The number I gave you." Tessa pulled the crumpled paper from her pocket. The ink had smeared with rain and sweat, but the numbers were still legible. She helped Kazuo to a bench near the entrance, where he collapsed with a grunt of pain. "I'll be right back," she said. His hand caught her wrist. "Tessa, if they don't answer. If no one comes." He paused, seeming to gather strength for what came next. "Take the money in my jacket. Get as far away as you can. New name, new city. Somewhere warm. You always seemed like you belonged somewhere warm. You're not dying in a truck stop parking lot. I've imagined worse places. Stop." Her voice cracked. "Just stop." She pulled away before he could see the tears and walked to the payphone on legs that barely remembered how to function. The receiver smelled like cigarettes and desperation. She fed quarters into the slot and dialed. Rang 6 times. Then a voice, female, crisp and professional. "Verification code." Tessa's mind went blank. "Code? What code? I don't have a code. Kazuo Takeda told me to call this number. He said to tell you the crane has fallen." Silence. Then. "Is he alive?" "Barely." "Location?" "Mountain View truck stop. Route 47. He's hurt badly. He needs 20 minutes. Get him inside. Public spaces. Stay visible." The line went dead. Tessa returned to find Kazuo exactly where she'd left him, eyes closed, breathing shallow. For a terrible moment she thought he'd already slipped away. Then his eyes opened, finding hers. "They're coming," she said. 20 minutes. He nodded faintly. "Good. That's good." She helped him into the truck stop diner, a different life, but the smell was the same. coffee and grease and the ghosts of 1,000 transient meals. The waitress, a tired woman in her 50s, took one look at them and pointed to a booth in the back. "Honey, your friend needs a hospital." "He's afraid of needles," Tessa said. The waitress snorted. "Ain't we all?" But she brought them coffee anyway, and a first aid kit that had seen better days. She didn't ask questions. In a place like this, questions were a luxury no one could afford. Tessa cleaned what wounds she could reach, Kazuo gritting his teeth against the pain. The other patrons, truckers mostly, a few travelers, pointedly ignored them. This was a place where people came to be invisible. They fit right in. "I'm sorry," Kazuo said suddenly. Tessa's hands stilled. "For which part?" "All of it. The diner. The danger. Using you." He met her eyes. "But mostly for making you into someone who can kill without hesitation." She thought about the men she'd shot. Young men, maybe with families, maybe just following orders. Dead because of her finger on a trigger. "I keep seeing their faces," she whispered. "I know. Does it get easier?" "No." His voice was rough. "Anyone who tells you it does is either lying or a monster. Which are you?" He smiled sadly. "Both probably. But I'm trying to be better." The coffee tasted like ashes in her mouth. "What happens now? After your people come? After you're safe?" "I don't know. Kenji might be dead. Might have escaped. Either way, the Takeda-gumi is finished. Kenji broke too many codes, burned too many bridges. The other families will carve up our territory like vultures. And you?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his untouched coffee. "I spent my whole life in that world. My grandfather's legacy, my father's empire. I thought I could reform it, make it something less monstrous. But you can't reform darkness. You can only choose to step into the light." "That sounds like a decision." "It is." He looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time since the storm there was something other than pain in his eyes. "I'm done, Tessa. Done with the Yakuza, done with the violence, done with the codes and the honor and the blood. If I survive this, if we survive this, I want out." "They'll let you walk away." "Probably not. The families have long memories. There will always be someone with a grudge, someone looking to make a reputation." He flexed his injured hand. "But there are places to disappear. Resources I've kept separate, clean money that Kenji didn't know about. Enough to start over." "Start over as what?" "A salaryman. You think you can just become normal?" "No. Normal is beyond me. But maybe quiet, anonymous, alive." He reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. "And maybe not alone." Her heart stuttered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you can't go back to Havenwood. Can't go back to Baltimore. Can't be Tessa Johnson anymore. She's compromised, known, marked. You need to disappear too." "I know that. So disappear with me." The words were soft, almost afraid. "I know I have no right to ask. I know what I've put you through, what I've made you become. But if you're going to start over anyway, if you're going to be someone new." He finally closed the distance, his scarred hand covering hers. "Be someone new with me." Tessa stared at their joined hands. This man had destroyed her life. Had lied to her, used her, dragged her through violence and betrayal. She should hate him. Should walk away the moment his people arrived and never look back. But when she looked at him, really looked, she didn't see the feared Yakuza boss. She saw a man who tried to honor his grandfather's memory in a world that had no use for honor. Who'd refused to become a monster even when it would have been easier. Who'd been betrayed by everyone he trusted and still chose to protect a stranger rather than save himself. She saw someone as broken and lost as she was. "I don't even know if I like you," she said. "I don't know if I like myself." This is insane. Yes. We'd be running forever. Looking over our shoulders. Never really safe. Probably. And you're a criminal. Killer. Everything I should stay away from. Absolutely. She should say no. Every rational part of her brain screamed to say no, to walk away, to take her chances alone. Instead, she squeezed his hand. Somewhere warm. Something broke in his expression, relief, disbelief, fragile hope. Somewhere warm, quiet, where no one knows our names. I've always wanted to see the ocean. I know a place. Small fishing village in Baja. My grandmother was from there before the war. I bought a house years ago, kept it off the books. Just a little place on the beach. Nothing special. It sounds perfect. It sounds impossible. Everything about this is impossible. She laughed, a sound caught between exhaustion and something that might have been joy. We're impossible. Yes. A black Mercedes pulled into the parking lot, expensive, discreet, its windows tinted. Two men in suits emerged, moving with the controlled efficiency of professional security. One scanned the area while the other entered the diner. His eyes finding Kazuo immediately. "Kumicho," he said, bowing slightly. "Not anymore, hero." Kazuo's voice was firm despite his weakness. That title died with the lodge. Hiro's expression remained neutral. The Yamaguchi-gumi is claiming they saved you from Kenji's treachery. They're demanding compensation for their intervention. Let them have whatever territory they want. I'm not negotiating. And Kenji, dead. Unconfirmed. The fire destroyed most of the lodge. They found bodies, but Hiro shrugged. The Yamaguchi are still searching. Kazuo absorbed this. Then it's not over. No, Kumik. No, Takeda-san. It's not. Good thing I'm leaving then. Kazuo struggled to his feet, swaying. Hiro moved to help him, but Kazuo waved him off, accepting Tessa's shoulder instead. I need my clean accounts liquidated. Everything converted to bearer bonds. Also new identities. Top quality, full background, unbreakable. For how many? Kazuo glanced at Tessa. 2. Hiro's eyes flickered to Tessa for the first time, assessing. The woman from the diner. The woman who saved my life. Multiple times. Steel entered Kazuo's voice. She's under my protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me. You're leaving the organization. Your protection won't. Then they answer to my ghost. Spread the word, Hiro. Any family, any clan, any street thug who even looks at her wrong, I'll come back. And I won't be bound by codes anymore. The threat hung in the air. Hiro nodded slowly. Understood. The accounts will take 48 hours. The identities maybe a week. Make it 3 days total. We can't stay in one place longer than that. There's a safe house in Seattle. Medical facilities, security. You can recover there. Kazuo looked to Tessa, a silent question. She nodded. 3 days, Kazuo repeated. Then we disappear. And Hiro. After this we never met. You never saw me. As far as the world knows, Kazuo Takeda died in that fire. Hiro bowed. It will be done. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Takeda-san, your grandfather would be proud. You kept your honor when no one else did. When he was gone, Tessa helped Kazuo toward the waiting Mercedes. The sun was fully up now, painting the mountains in shades of gold and amber. New day. A new beginning. Are you scared? She asked. Terrified. He looked down at her. You. Out of my mind. Good. Fear means we're still alive. The driver held the door open. Tessa helped Kazuo into the back seat, then slid in beside him. The interior smelled like leather and money, the trappings of the world he was leaving behind. As they pulled out of the truck stop, Tessa looked back one last time at the diner, at the payphone, at the last piece of the world she'd known. Then she faced forward, toward the unknown road ahead. Kazuo's hand found hers in the space between them. Not grabbing, not demanding, just reaching. Offering. She took it. 3 days in Seattle, she said. Then Baja. Then Baja. New names, new lives. Maybe I'll learn to fish. Maybe I'll learn to relax. Now you're dreaming. She laughed, and this time it was real. The sound of someone who'd survived the unsurvivable and come out the other side, changed but unbroken. The Mercedes merged onto the highway. Just another expensive car among thousands, carrying 2 people who no longer existed toward a future that didn't yet have a name. Behind them, smoke still rose from the mountains. Behind them, the wreckage of 2 lives lay scattered like debris after a storm. Behind them, the world they'd known was burning. But ahead there was ocean and sunlight and the possibility of peace. It wouldn't be easy. Kenji might still be alive, hunting them. Other families might decide that honor demanded vengeance. The past would follow them like a shadow, always present, never quite catching up. But they'd survived worse. Together. 6 months later. The house in Baja was exactly as Kazuo had described. Nothing special. Whitewashed walls, a tile roof that had seen better decades, a small porch overlooking a stretch of beach that tourism hadn't discovered yet. At night, you could hear the ocean breathing against the shore, a rhythm as old as the world. Tessa stood on that porch now, watching the sun set in spectacular shades of orange and pink. Her hair was lighter from the sun, her skin bronzed. Her hands, once soft from diner work, had developed calluses from helping repair the house's endless small disasters. She was someone new. Maria Garcia, according to her papers. A translator from Mexico City, semi-retired, living on her modest savings. No connection to Baltimore, to Havenwood, to the last stop diner and the night that changed everything. Behind her, she heard the screen door open. Footsteps on weathered wood. The roof is leaking again, Kazuo said, settling into the chair beside hers. He moved easier now, the wounds healed to scars, his strength returned. His hair was longer, shot through with distinguished silver that made him look more like a professor than a crime boss. I've decided the house is conspiring against me. You've survived Yakuza assassins, but you're defeated by plumbing? Even I have limits. She smiled. They did this now, traded small jokes about normal problems. Leaking roofs and grocery shopping, and whether the tomatoes in their modest garden would survive. Mundane, beautiful things that people like them weren't supposed to have. Anything? She asked, the question they asked each other every few days. He knew what she meant. News from the old world. But warnings. Nothing. Hiro checked in through the usual channels. Kenji's body was never found, but there's been no movement, no sightings. Either he's dead or he's given up. You don't believe that? No. But I choose to live as if it's true. He reached over, taking her hand. What's the alternative? Spend every day waiting for the end. That's not living. No, she agreed. It's not. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the waves. A pair of children ran along the beach, chasing a dog. An old man fished from the rocks. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that 2 ghosts sat watching them from a house that didn't exist on any official map. Do you regret it? Kazuo asked suddenly. This life. Leaving everything behind. Tessa considered. I regret the diner. I regret the people who died. I regret. She paused. I regret that we didn't meet some other way. Somewhere normal. But no. I don't regret this. She gestured to the beach, the house, the life they'd built from ashes and desperation. It's strange and it's fragile and it might all fall apart tomorrow. But it's ours. Ours, he repeated, as if testing the word. I've never had something that was just mine. Not the clan's, not my father's legacy. Just this. Is it enough? He pulled her close, his lips brushing her temple. It's everything. The sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and indigo. Soon the stars would emerge, cold and distant and beautiful. The same stars that had watched them run through forests and storm drains, that had witnessed violence and betrayal and unlikely survival. But tonight those stars would watch something different. Two people, holding each other on a porch that smelled like salt and weathered wood. Learning to be happy. Learning to be free. The ocean breathed its ancient rhythm. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked. Life, in all its messy, mundane glory, continued. And for now, for this moment, that was enough. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.